In a world where reality can be rewritten, what happens when everything you fought for is erased? Two heroes, two survivors, two broken souls standing in the aftermath of oblivion. One watched his timeline collapse. Friends, memories, entire worlds reduced to nothing but echoes. A guardian who failed to protect what mattered most, yet refused to let the story end there. The other walked a path paved with ideals, only to see them burn. A boy who dreamed of saving everyone, forced to confront the unbearable weight of failure, regret, and the cost of becoming a hero. Both lost everything, not in battle, not by defeat, but by erasure. And yet, they kept moving forward. Across shattered timelines and fractured realities, they fight, not just for victory, but for restoration. For the impossible chance to bring back what was taken, and to defy a fate that has already declared their worlds gone. But grief changes people. Remorse shapes them. And the question is no longer who they were, but what they've become. When the dust of oblivion settles, and two broken heroes stand against the void itself, who has the will to rewrite their world, and who will fall trying? This is not a clash of just power, but of purpose. Hello everybody, Dusty here. In this video, I will be talking about one of my personal favorite versus debates of all time. This is a battle between two survivors of their world's destruction, and those characters are Cross from the criminally underrated show Underverse, and Shirou Emiya from the anime Fate/Stay Night. I'll be comparing their stats, such as strength, speed, durability, IQ, experience, and their abilities, to come to the conclusion on who would win this fight. Before we get to that, however, I need to tell you about their backstories, starting with Cross. In the world of Underverse, Cross, often called Cross Sans or just C, is a version of Sans whose story begins in the alternate universe X-Tale. His timeline was tightly controlled by a very powerful being, X-Gaster, who repeatedly reset and manipulated events to force a, quote, perfect ending. Cross endured countless cycles of death, loss, and forced repetition, gradually becoming aware that his world was trapped in an artificial loop. As his awareness grew, so did his desperation, and he began to resist, trying to defy the very script of his universe. This rebellion ultimately caused his timeline to destabilize and collapse entirely, leaving Cross as one of the last remnants of a broken reality, carrying both the determination that sustained him and the crushing guilt of surviving when others could not. After escaping into the multiverse, Cross emerges in Underverse as a far more intense and battle-hardened version of Sans. Unlike the typically lazy or comedic variants, he is focused, volatile, and deeply mistrustful of others' intentions. His experiences have taught him that timelines can be erased at any moment, so he clings to control as a way to prevent further loss. He often clashes ideology with Ink Sans, who values persevering all universes, while Cross is more willing to destroy threats outright if it meant avoiding another collapse. Cross also retains fragments of his past connections, memories of friendships and bonds that no longer exist, which subtly influence his decisions and make him more emotionally complex than he appears. What makes Cross especially compelling is the internal conflict he carries. He wants to do what's right, but his definition of right has been warped by trauma and repeated tragedy. He fears powerlessness more than anything, Yet the power he seeks risks turning him into something similar to the forces that destroyed his world. This tension places him in a constant gray area between protector and destroyer, making him one of the most morally complex and tragic figures within the Underverse storyline. Although he eventually found comfort in the assistance of Dream Sands, who helped Cross become his own person, away from the influence of the X event and the cold hands of X-Gaster. Shirou Emiya is the central protagonist of Fate/Stay Night, and his backstory is defined by trauma, survival, and an almost self-destructive idealism. As a child, Shirou was the sole survivor of a massive fire in Fuyuki City, an event later revealed to be caused by the destructive aftermath of the Fourth Holy Grail War. He was rescued and adopted by a magus named Kiritsugu Emiya, who inspired him with the dream of becoming a hero of justice, someone who saves anyone regardless of cost. After Kiritsugu's death, Shirou lives alone and begins practicing basic magecraft, despite having little natural talent, clinging stubbornly to that ideal. What makes Shirou especially tragic is the deeper implication of his path. In certain timelines, his ruthless pursuit of saving others leads him to become Archer, a future version of himself who made a contract with the Counterforce. In doing so, Shirou effectively sacrifices his freedom and becomes a tool that perceives humanity by killing threats, even if it means slaughtering the very people he once swore to protect. This existence is so far removed from his original ideal that it's often described as the erasure of his world. His personal hopes, identity, and meaning are overwritten, leaving behind only a mechanism that enforces survival at any cost. This grim fate creates a central conflict in the story, as Shirou is forced to confront whatever his dream is worth the price of losing himself entirely. So now that you know who these characters are, let's get to the main event. I want to set some rules down on the table so that this video doesn't go all over the place. I will be using feats from their canon materials only. That would be the Underverse show and X-Tale lore for Cross, and the Fate anime/manga and light novels for Shirou, as well as the Honkai Star Rail collab, since that is technically canon. I will also not be including X-Chara for Cross's feats, because while they did share a body for a large portion of the show, in current canon they are now separate entities. Other than that, I'll be giving both characters everything that they themselves have used throughout their series. Now that we got that out of the way, let's begin by talking about their first stat, their strength. Cross is a pretty powerful character within the Underverse reality. For starters, Cross can very easily destroy ink constructs made by ink sands with only a few slashes. Cross is also stronger than X-Metaton, who created an explosion so big that it destroyed an entire city block. Cross, even while fatigued, was capable of defeating the entirety of the X-Tale cast by himself single-handedly. This includes characters like X-Asgore, who was strong enough to injure X-Gaster, who can recreate entire timelines and universes with his own power. Cross was also capable of hurting Error Sans, who was so powerful that he can destroy every single universe within the Doodle Sphere. There are over 1,000 timelines within the Doodle Sphere, as stated by Ink Sans, as well as countless universes. This makes Error Sans a 5D to even 7D, or complex multiversal being. While Cross is obviously weaker than Error Sans, he was still able to keep up with him for decent while and even deal some lasting damage. Cross was also able to fight and nearly kill Killer Sans, who is a being capable of one-shotting characters like Outer Tail Sans, as well as erasing entire timelines with his determination, as stated in the lore of the Something New AU, where Killer Sans originates. So how strong is Cross? Well, Cross should scale to complex multiversal levels of power. And yeah, he's considered a mid-tier fighter in terms of raw power. That just goes to show how powerful Undertale AUs are. Shirou Emiya is an incredibly powerful warrior within the Fate universe. Emiya was capable of fighting Kuri and eventually beating him. This is the same guy that can casually punch large craters into concrete walls and defeating CL and the true assassin. He should also be comparable to Siegfried's A+ ranked noble phantoms, who are strong enough to, quote, blow the whole Orleans region away. Emiya was also capable of destroying an eighth of Berserker's body as well, which as well as being strong enough to block blows from freaking Gilgamesh. Which, if you know who Gilgamesh is, this is insane. However, Shirou Emiya is objectively way weaker than Gilgamesh, and he was only able to beat him through Gilgamesh's own arrogance, so it would be kind of dumb to scale him to Gilgamesh, considering how much weaker he is than Gilgamesh. In Honkai Star Rail, and as Archer, he was able to contend with Saber, who could clash with and defeat Lancer. Saber was also capable of destroying the Holy Grail, which is an omnipotent wish-making chalice which can bend reality across the multiverse. So overall, how strong is Emiya? Well, Emiya can scale to having low, complex, multiversal levels of power. So who's stronger? Well, both of these characters are ludicrously powerful, and both have dealt with universe and even multiversal level threats on numerous occasions. However, the edge goes to Cross, but it's extremely close. Emiya is an extremely powerful character, but he just falls an ever so slight inch short in this category. Now let's move on to the next stat, their speed. Cross is a pretty fast character within Underverse. Cross was capable of creating a sonic boom just by running, which requires speeds faster than sound. He can also keep up with characters who competed with X-Gaster, who was fast enough to intercept and stop Cross's Gaster Blasters before anybody could even react. Cross is also comparable to characters like Classic Sans and Blueberry, who in the case of Blueberry, was able to keep up with a bloodlusted ex-Chara and catch one of his knives. Cross is also capable of keeping up with characters like Ink Sans, Error Sans, and Fatal Error Sans, which all three of them can dodge Error's blue strings, which move at 1.2% the speed of light. So overall, how fast is Cross? Well, at his very peak, Cross has sub-relativistic plus levels of speed. Shirou Emiya is an extremely quick fighter within the Fate universe. Emiya can not only fight characters like Hooray, but he can also react to the attacks from the servants. Emiya was capable of breaking the speed of sound while fighting Berserker, as well as being able to keep up with Berserker. Berserker is a character who is capable of moving at relativistic speeds, such as that time where he intercepted an attack from Castor. Emiya was also capable of keeping up with Gilgamesh and Archer, even though he was way slower than them. Emiya has also been stated on a very consistent basis to not only think at faster than light speeds, but also have these FTL levels of reaction speeds. It's a good thing to note that this is only his reaction speed and not his actual combat or travel speeds. So to make this more understandable, while Shirou Emiya would have relativistic combat and travel speeds, but faster than light or FTL reaction speeds. So who's faster? Well, this is yet another extremely close one. However, Emiya would take the edge. Cross is incredibly fast, keeping up with characters who can move faster than perception and move 1.2% faster than light, but Emiya just ever so slightly edges him out, thanks to his fights against characters like Berserker and Archer. Now let's move on to the next stat, durability. Unlike his classic video game counterpart, Cross can take one hell of a beating. He was able to survive his fight against Fatal Error Sans, who was a stronger entity than Error Sans, and he even had his limbs ripped off in that fight. Cross was also capable of taking a beating from Nightmare Sans, who was a being stronger than the Guardian Nim, who could move entire universes with her power and affect the multiverse. Nightmare was also capable of overpowering Xchara, who can rewrite entire universes and timelines. Cross was also capable of taking blows from Error Sans, who, if you paid attention to what I said earlier about him, then you would know that this is pretty impressive. So overall, Cross should have complex multiversal levels of durability. Shirou Emiya is capable of taking some very powerful blows. Shirou was able to survive being kicked so hard that he went flying through a concrete wall and plummeting down a 3-story building to the ground. Emiya was also capable of taking beatings from characters like the Shadows, Berserker, and even Archer, who, I've said a few times, is the future version of himself. Archer is the same guy who was able to go toe for toe with Gilgamesh despite being weaker. Archer was also capable of taking blows from Trailblazer and Saber within the Honkai Star Rail collab, although it's good to note that Saber wasn't really going all out against Archer. So overall, Emiya can be scaled to having complex multiversal levels of durability. Also, if you want to question why his durability is not equal to his attack, it's kind of a part of his character where he represents himself as being more durable than he is strong. So who's more durable? Well, both of these characters have extreme levels of durability and have taken severe punishments. Both can take blows from universe to even multiverse busters and walk off damage. Both have similar levels of durability, so I'm going to call this stat a tie. Let's move on to the next two stats, IQ and experience. Cross is a way better and experienced fighter compared to most other versions of the funny Bone Man. For starters, he has actually gotten lots of formal training as a member of the Royal Guard before his world was erased. Cross is also an expert when it comes to understanding his abilities, and he is also extremely good with a blade. Cross is also a pretty good strategist, to the point where he was able to confidently criticize Classic Sans for having bad strategies. Even while extremely outnumbered by people just as skilled, if not more skilled than him, he was able to come out on top, such as that time where he soloed X-Tail by himself. Cross is also capable of analyzing his opponents as well as his surroundings to get a better vantage point on the battlefield. As for experience, his Royal Guard training lasted for 10 whole years, and it made him a very tactical fighter. Cross has also fought a large variety of foes, most of which were even stronger than him for a pretty long while. So overall, Cross is an extremely intelligent and experienced warrior. Shirou Emiya is undoubtedly a high tier when it comes to battle intelligence. First of all, Shirou did receive formal training from Saber during the Fifth Holy Grail War. However, she only trained him for a max of 14 days, since their skill levels were so far apart that Saber couldn't really teach him the advanced techniques that she knows. Shirou is also capable of calmly analyzing any situation he finds himself in, even in the most dire of situations, and finding a way to make an intelligent decision. A downside is that he's extremely stubborn, putting everything he can into whatever he's facing, which sometimes puts him in bad situations. After his encounter with Archer, his skills quickly developed at faster rates, and he can even call upon Archer's knowledge whenever he wants. However, Shirou's self-destructive thought process tends to hold him back, and has even put him in dangerous situations a few times. However, some skills that Shirou does have is that he's a prodigy when it comes to archery, having never missed a target unless it was on purpose. Unlike swordsmanship, which he struggles with, he finds archery unchallenging and soon loses interest since he has perfected it from the start. So Shirou is a very intelligent warrior, but how experienced is he? Well, he comes off as inexperienced and arrogant, but he's rather experienced. Okay, no, not really. I mean, he's capable of replicating powerful weapons and can fight powerful opponents, but he's been very easily defeated or overpowered several times. However, Archer is very experienced, and Shirou can call upon his intelligence and experience in a fight, and Archer himself has years of experience and has several war victories under his name, as well as a full mastery of his abilities. So yeah, Emiya, mostly Archer, is an extremely experienced and very intelligent warrior. So who takes the edge in these stats? Well, it's pretty closer and a lot closer than people think. However, Cross has the edge in both stats. Cross has had a lot more formal training than Emiya and is a lot more collected fighter. Shirou's stubbornness and self-destructive attitude really detriments him from being the perfect fighter. While being able to draw from Archer's levels of intelligence and experience is very useful, it's just not enough to have the direct edge over Cross. Think of it as while Shirou is very intelligent and experienced, especially if he draws from Archer, it's his mentality and way of going about fights that really holds him back from being at his full potential. So Cross takes the edge in both IQ and experience. Before I come to the conclusion on who wins, I need to talk about their abilities. Cross has a lot of very powerful abilities on his side. Cross has the Sans AU staples of Gaster Blasters, which are magical artifacts that fire beams of magic that damage the soul of the opponent, as well as bypassing durability. Cross can also manipulate the bones he creates to form constructs like barriers to block attacks, or just use them as attacks like spears or clubs. Cross is also shown to be capable of teleportation, which helps him get around the battlefield better and helps him dodge attacks he wouldn't be able to block. While Cross used to be able to manipulate code with the hack knife and regenerate himself by manipulating his own code, he can't do that anymore since his soul is no longer connected to Chara's, which was the source of this power. Cross is capable of stealing the soul of his opponent, similar to what he did to Classic Sans in Underverse 0.0, resist damage done to his own soul, as we see during his fight against Fatal Error, can summon weapons to his hand, and can even travel across to other universes. Cross also has the ability called Blue Soul, which allows him to take over his opponent's soul and throw them around similar to telekinesis, or alter their gravity, immobilize them, etc., similar to what we see Classic Sans do in the game Undertale. So as you can tell, Cross has some very powerful abilities on his side. Shirou Emiya has quite a few very strong abilities under his belt. Shirou has an ability called Projection Magecraft, which allows him to copy any weapon he wants down to their structure, history, and even the best way how to wield the weapon. Shirou also has Reinforcement Magecraft, which allows him to enhance his stats, such as strength, speed, and durability, to certain limits. Shirou has near perfect structural analysis, which allows him to understand the composition and function of weapons and other objects, as well as him being able to copy the fighting styles of the users of the weapons he copied, enhance his projection, and can accelerate his combat capability. He does have a healing factor, however, this requires Saber to be nearby, or this requires him to have a contract with Saber, so he doesn't have it for like 95% of the time, meaning I won't give it to him here. Shirou has lots of equipment on him that helps him in battle. He has Kansho and Bayuka, which are his twin blades that are his main choice in combat. He has various projected noble phantasms, such as a imitation of Excalibur, which obviously is a lot weaker than the actual blade itself, Caliburn, etc. He has Ro Ias, which is a multi-layered shield to block attacks, and he also has Archer's Arm, which grants him immense power, but has the drawback of damaging his own body. But his final piece of equipment is the Sealing Shroud, which allows him to suppress the effects of Archer's Arm and reduce the stress placed on his internal organs. So who wins? Well, it's very clear that both Cross and Shirou Emiya are extremely powerful warriors. Cross is the stronger one, but Shirou is the faster one. Both are equally as durable, but Cross is definitely the better fighter. This fight is actually very close, and it's a very interesting one to break down. Both at a baseline are so incredibly close in basically every stat that there is no outright winner. With Shirou's ability to boost his stats, he can definitely eventually grow to being stronger, faster, and more durable than Cross, but there is one major factor that he doesn't really have an answer to: Cross's ability to manipulate and interact with souls. Shirou has never outright shown to be capable of resisting soul damage or manipulation before. So even if he boosts his stats to as high as they can possibly go, he would just have his soul destroyed and be one-shot through all of his stat boosts. Cross can also just flat out ignore his durability with his Gaster Blasters and soul damage, so boosting his durability wouldn't really do anything. Even if Shirou makes himself faster than Cross, even in those FTL levels of speed that his reaction speeds are, with Blue Soul he can just be made completely immobile, making his speed boosts basically moot. So yeah, while Shirou is insanely powerful, he just barely falls short in this bout. So the winner for this video is Cross, with high difficulty. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. This video allowed me to talk about one of my favorite characters of all time in Cross, and also allowed me to learn about a different character who found interesting in the past but didn't know too much about. If you disagree with anything I said in this video, make sure to comment down below and I'll be sure to read your comment. If you also want to recommend any fights, also make sure to comment them down below and I'll add them to my list. Stay tuned for next time as I cover the longly debated Goku vs. Saitama, Dragon Ball vs. One Punch Man. Anyways, I'm Dusty and I'm signing off. Have a wonderful day and be good people.